Influencer marketing, 1957. What's that look like, Richard?
Well, Ian, we're about to find out.
Cool, so yeah, today, I don't know, we basically have these things here and we want to talk about these things. So Richard and I were having coffee down at the Orange Circle and walked into the Orange Antique Mall and basically came across a crate of stuff, like old stuff. And so, funny enough, these are vintage ads that date back to the 20s. Some of them are from the 50s. And so we just like totally geeked out on them. I ended up getting like 30 of them. And so we just thought to kind of share that with you guys and like talk through them.
Totally. It's a real one man's trash is another man's treasure situation because the Orange Circle is well known for all of its antique malls. And this particular mall had crates and crates of these ads that were selling for like 10 cents a pop because nobody wanted them. But as we've been obviously here at the agency, I think they're really, really valuable. So what we did was, as we've been thinking about creative and we think about advertising at large, outside of just simply tactics on Facebook, we've been trying to think about these big philosophical questions, let's say, about advertising. Like, what exactly is it that people want? What type of creative do they respond to? And so finding these ads was a great way to sort of cast back to the past to see what's worked or what people were trying. And one thing that I noticed, and I think we all noticed, is that to some extent, it's all kind of the same stuff. And print advertising and Facebook advertising are really similar in a lot of ways. Namely that unlike TV advertising, which interrupts the flow of what you're watching, both print ads and Facebook ads, you're able to scroll past and kind of consume as need be. So the way that you grab attention becomes a lot different. Because you can't demand it, you have to command it. So I guess we kind of wanted to go through some of these and just sort of talk through why we thought they were cool.
Yeah.
And
you know what I was tripping out on? I was like, I don't know. I always think about like the techniques that you have available should inform or create the format. But like in looking at these, like, I don't know, quick history kind of throwback to like what it took to make this thing. Like what a graphic designer was someone who could cut paper out, paint it, tape it together, scan it, take a photo, cut it out, paint it, put it on top, scan it, go through that process over and over and over again. And to create an image like this, like there was no Photoshop, obviously.
Right.
And so it would take weeks and weeks of manual labor to create stuff. And so like, and even thinking about like camera technology or like all the technology that we have available, like you think that the kind of traditional format will have changed in many ways, but like actually it's kind of similar, if not like the same, you know?
To some extent, it's just we've created circumstances where it's a lot easier to do the type of stuff that people used to be doing 50 years ago. So it definitely makes you feel grateful for Photoshop.
Right, and like,
all that kind of thing.
Yeah, so this one's super cool. Mr. Phil Rizzuto, too small to play ball. And so basically like we looked at this and given all the stuff that we do for FC Goods and all the active lifestyle brands, it's like, hey wait, like, that's what we call a human interest. Like basically it's a whole piece of copy on Rizzuto, but if you look down in the lower right, it's Lockheed Aircraft Corporation. And so like there's a whole text about him and how he was short and his adversity, and then like ties it back to this like corporation, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because essentially what this is influencer marketing on a macro level. We got Phil Rizzuto, who's our influencer, the story that ties him into his use of the aircraft. Now, from my perspective, coming at it today, using a baseball player as an influencer for a Lockheed Martin private jet, I'm not exactly sure who the audience for this is. However, I think it's just really interesting that that strategy remains the same, that nothing much has changed. One thing that I think that's interesting about this ad, this 7-Up ad, to some extent this one, but then especially this ad here, is that these, all three of these are based on a tried and true research principle, right? I think like we can have this perspective on advertising in the past as not being scientifically driven, and to some extent a lot of it was. But this format here with the picture and then with the copy underneath is really important because research proves that people are way more likely to read a caption than they are to read any other piece of copy. And so what people do is they start following that data and build ads around that idea that all of the copy and all of the selling becomes a caption to a picture. So you can not guarantee, but be a little more certain that people are reading what you're writing to them. Because people don't like to read unless they do, which is sort of the problem that we run into. This is my favorite one here. We'll get a close-up on that, but it's the headline here, which room has the most easy chairs, question mark, with a picture. Now you can imagine that even being something like, you won't, in a sort of a modern context, you won't believe which room has the most easy chairs, right? Like asking those kind of clickbaity questions, it's all the same stuff, right? It's getting people to think and people to sort of question their reality. And I think this is a really interesting one because obviously the implication is that it's the garage, right? You show the blueprint and that the place with the most comfort in your house now becomes wherever your car is. And as a selling point, I think that's fantastic because it sells you on a visceral experience, which is that you can tell people that it gets great gas mileage or that it's, it's fun to drive or whatever. But what people experience on a day-to-day is that it's comfortable to sit in. And obviously there's probably some context in the 50s around which that was really important for the market at the time. But I just think this is a really effective ad and a really good illustration of the fact that advertising principles and philosophy don't really change much. What you're trying to do, you're trying to get at the same thing people have always been getting at, which is how does this benefit a person? What are the features? How is it going to make a person's life better? And then how do you tap into that and how do you communicate it effectively?
So cool. So cool. I mean, that one too, like, there is a visceral experience in terms of thinking about easy chair. I imagine like thick, plush, leather, reclining, feet up, and then like I just had that mental experience that then I see an image of a car. They're not talking about performance, they're talking about like the actual visceral sensation of driving that car. And so it's just cool to like really connect that even just in text.
Right.
So then you layer on like video and sound and all the techniques that we have, like it just kind of like gets us, I don't know, gets me really excited to think about like how to get that visceral reaction and association with something and then position a product for them to have that same kind of experience.
Yeah.
Super cool.
So I think it's a smart ad, it's smart creative, and it's a smart way to think about ad strategy and sales strategy. And I think for us, finding success is about tapping into whatever it is creatively that drove this ad and then translating into a digital format.
So newer isn't always better, right?
Right. Well, newer isn't necessarily better and older isn't necessarily better.
Right.
I think it's just certain principles about what people want and what people are interested in don't change, but the sort of specifics of what those things are might.
So fun. Well, thanks.
Cool.
There you go. Influencer marketing 1957. Thanks, Rizzuto.
That's right.